Tonight, a famous name sat in a quiet Beijing studio and did something most public figures avoid at all costs. He spoke about marriage, not as a headline, not as a performance, but as a responsibility. And what made it even more striking, the person everyone expected to see wasn't there. No drama, no excuses. Just one man, one camera, and a few carefully chosen words that made thousands of viewers pause and think, have we misunderstood what privacy really means? Stay with me, because the real story here is not gossip. It's what happens when love is forced to live under a magnifying glass. What struck viewers first was not a revelation, but a pause, a stillness, a silence that refused to be filled with performance or justification. In a media landscape where noise is often mistaken for honesty, this quiet carried unusual weight. It suggested intention rather than avoidance. Silence here was not emptiness, it was structure. It allowed words to arrive without being pushed, and meaning to surface without being forced. For many viewers, especially those who have lived long enough to understand the cost of careless speech, this restraint felt familiar. It echoed the kind of silence that exists in serious family conversations, where one pauses not because they have nothing to say, but because what they say must be chosen carefully. This kind of silence demands more from the audience. It asks them to listen rather than react, to reflect rather than judge, and in doing so, it establishes trust. Not the trust built by dramatic confession, but the quieter trust that comes when someone refuses to turn their personal life into a spectacle. In that moment, silence became communication. It signaled that this was not about defending an image or winning sympathy. It was about acknowledging reality with dignity. And for many viewers, that alone was enough to make them stay. Her absence was not explained, announced, or framed as a mystery. And precisely because of that, it carried meaning. In a culture accustomed to constant visibility, absence can feel unsettling. Yet here, it functioned as a boundary, clear, deliberate, and quietly firm. What this absence communicated was not distance, but respect. It reminded viewers that not everyone connected to a public figure has consented to live publicly. That participation in a shared life does not automatically translate into participation in a public narrative. For many mature viewers, this resonated deeply, reflecting long-held values around privacy, discretion, and personal choice. Rather than weakening the story, her absence strengthened it. It shifted attention away from speculation and towards responsibility. It forced the focus onto the person who chose to speak and onto the limits of what should be spoken at all. In a subtle way, the absence also asked the audience to reconsider their own expectations. Are we listening to understand or to consume? Are we respecting boundaries or quietly resenting them? By not filling the space, the interview allowed that question to linger. And in doing so, it transformed absence into presence, an ethical presence that reminded viewers that dignity sometimes means choosing not to appear. One of the most quietly powerful ideas in this content is that pressure does not automatically destroy a marriage. Instead, it changes its shape. When public scrutiny enters a private relationship, the structure adapts, often in ways that are invisible from the outside. Daily life becomes more measured. Conversations are weighed more carefully. Decisions once made casually now carry additional consequences. This does not necessarily indicate weakness. In many cases, it reflects a form of adaptation, an attempt to protect what matters most while navigating forces beyond one's control. For viewers who have experienced long-term relationships, this concept feels intuitive. Marriage is not static. It evolves through illness, career shifts, family obligations, and external stress. Fame simply accelerates that process and magnifies its effects. What is often misunderstood is that adaptation can look like distance, restraint, or silence. From the outside, it may be misread as emotional withdrawal. From within, it can be an act of preservation. This reframing challenges the simplistic idea that pressure reveals failure. Instead, it suggests that pressure reveals process. And for many viewers, this offers a more compassionate lens through which to view not only public marriages, but their own. Perhaps the most resonant emotional thread is the recognition of an imbalance, one that is rarely discussed openly. When one partner is constantly visible, the other often becomes invisible by necessity. And with that invisibility comes a particular kind of weight. Criticism aimed at a public figure is often abstract. It targets roles, images, or projected identities. Criticism aimed at the quieter partner is more personal. It questions motives, worth, and character. This distinction matters because personal scrutiny lingers differently. It is absorbed, carried, and rarely shared. For many viewers, especially those who have played supporting roles in their own families, this dynamic feels deeply familiar. The person who speaks less publicly often carries more privately, not because they are weaker, but because someone must hold the center steady. What makes this weight particularly heavy is that it is seldom acknowledged. There are no headlines for endurance, no applause for restraint. Yet relationships often survive precisely because someone chooses to absorb pressure rather than redirect it outward. By bringing this imbalance into the open, without accusation or drama, the content invites viewers to recognize a form of strength that rarely receives attention but quietly sustains many lives. Choosing restraint is often praised in theory, but its cost is rarely examined. This content gently reveals that doing the right thing does not mean doing the easy thing. Silence can protect a relationship from escalation, but it can also concentrate emotional strain within it. When couples decide not to respond publicly, they are not avoiding responsibility. They are often absorbing tension internally to prevent wider harm. This choice requires patience, emotional regulation, and a willingness to carry unresolved feelings without immediate relief. For mature audiences, this insight rings true. Many life decisions, caring for aging parents, maintaining family harmony, protecting children, require similar sacrifices. The outside world sees calm. The inside world manages complexity. What makes this particularly poignant is the absence of complaint. The cost is acknowledged, but not dramatized. There's no attempt to frame endurance as heroism. It is presented simply as part of the reality of choosing stability over reaction. In a culture that rewards instant expression, this perspective feels almost countercultural. It reminds viewers that responsibility is often quiet, and that emotional maturity is not measured by how loudly one speaks, but by how much one is willing to hold. If you found this perspective thoughtful, please subscribe to Update X24.vh for more calm, respectful updates and deeper storytelling without turning real lives into a spectacle. Thank you for watching and for choosing empathy over assumptions. Keep an eye on the channel for our next upload. And until then, take care of yourselves and take care with the words you leave behind online.